Hello. Today's topic is the lack of infinitive in modern Greek. As many of you know, ancient Greek not only had an infinitive, it even had different tenses of the infinitive, so each verb had many infinitive forms. This, however, is no longer the case in modern Greek, and this leaves us with the question, how do we express when in ancient Greek you had an infinitive, how do you express this in modern Greek? To simplify things a bit, I narrowed down the cases we are looking to look at into two. One is when you have two verbs. So, in ancient Greek, you could have an infinitive if you had a phrase like, I want to play. Notice it's very typical that in English you will have this to, right? To play, to run, whatever, okay? But not only that, in things like, I like running, normally, in languages that have an infinitive in Europe, you could use there the infinitive. So what do you do there in these kind of situations with two verbs, one after the other, with the same subject? Like, I want to study English. I want, and I study, although we don't say it this way, English. In modern Greek, you use a subjunctive. So you would do the same thing that you would do if the two verbs had a different subject. To give you an example, you would use a subjunctive also, of course, if you wanted something like, I want you to play. Okay, and that's what you would do anyway in languages like Spanish or Italian today. But this language would use the infinitive if the subject were the same, like, I want to play. Not you, not him, but I want to play. In Greek, in both cases, we use a subjunctive, okay? So, θέλω να παίξω. Some other examples, μου αρέσει να τρέχω. Now, some people might object here that in the case of μου αρέσει, we don't really have the same subject, but actually this is how it works. If you look into Spanish, for instance, me gusta correr. Anyway, μπορώ να δω, θέλουμε να πάμε. Okay, so we just use the subjunctive. There is no infinitive, so we use the other grammatical resource. We have the subjunctive, and it's perfectly fine. This is something that might be confusing to people coming from languages that originate from Latin, but it's actually a simpler approach than sometimes using the subjunctive and some other times using the infinitive. Oh, I understand this part might have been a bit difficult. But yeah, this is all you have to say about this first part. That in modern Greek, it doesn't really matter. In these cases where you connect two different verbs, you just use the subjunctive regardless of the subjects of the verbs. Now, the second one is when we're using the infinitive in place of a noun, right, as a noun, in phrases like to err is human, like to use the ancient phrase in Latin, errare humanum est, yeah? Now, in these kind of situations, in modern Greek, it's a bit more complicated, a bit more interesting what's going on, because there is a choice here. How are you going to translate to err into modern Greek? Now, there is one straightforward way to do this, and this would be to have to in front of the subjunctive. So we are going to say here, to translate to err is human, we're going to say το να κάνεις λάθη είναι ανθρώπινο. However, this construction with to and then a subjunctive, many people including myself to an extent, find this to be a bit lacking in elegance. It's not the most refined way to say it, and especially, this is the thing, that you are translating a phrase that sounds very elegant in English or in Latin, and in Greek it sounds, very kind of colloquial. That's the problem here. It's not that I have something against this tona, which we use, all of us Greeks use in everyday speech. The problem is that the original language would be, some people attribute to Seneca, so translating Seneca with a very colloquial phrase maybe is not the best way to do it. So a way around it would be to play a bit with the phrase and say something like "Τα λάθη είναι ανθρώπινα." Mistakes are human. So just drop the whole infinitive thing altogether and convey the same meaning. Again, this is something for which you probably need a translator. It's one of the few moments that, you still need a human to think a bit what is best suited for the text. Do you want to go for the colloquial phrase, or do you want to find a way to go around it and just erase the fact that in the original you had an infinitive? Another thing to say here is that in many phrases we have retained the infinitive. In modern Greek we still use some phrases with the infinitive. So if you want to translate such a phrase, you might want to actually look it up and see if an infinitive is being used by modern speakers. For instance, το λακωνίζειν εστί φιλοσοφήν. So here we use to, but in front of an infinitive. We don't say το να λακωνίζεις. We just keep the phrase as it is, and we even use the verb εστί instead of είναι here, because it's an ancient sounding phrase. Or another ancient phrase retained as it is, το δείξ εξαμαρτήν ουκ ανδρός σοφού. Now, a last thing I'm going to say here is to talk a bit about this pretty weird idea of the infinitive in modern Greek grammar. Those of you who have studied the Greek grammar in some depth will know that the term infinitive, aparémφατο, is used in the modern Greek textbooks. How do they define this infinitive in modern Greek? They define it, and I'm using just what I found online, but it's fun to listen to it. A non-finite form of a verb that is used to form periphrastic tenses. Yeah, right. So basically they're talking about the past participle. If you rethink what the definition they just gave you, a non-finite form of a verb that is used to form periphrastic tenses, we're talking about something like eaten in I have eaten, or gone in you have gone. That's what they're talking about here. So it's a verb form that stays always the same. It does not change. And it's used to form a tense, a perfect tense, like present perfect or past perfect or whatever. So just to give you some more examples from modern Greek, in έχω παίξει, παίξει would count as an infinitive. In έχω τρέξει, τρέξει would count as an infinitive. In έχουμε ακούσει, ακούσει would count as an infinitive. What this means is that instead of... I'm going to give a personal opinion here. Instead of having something, instead of having an infinitive in modern Greek, what you really have here is a very unfortunate choice of name. There are some arguments to back this opinion, but in fact I think that in practice this is more confusing than helping learners. So, this is all I have to say about this topic for today. And also I should add that it's a quite advanced topic. probably addressed to people who are C1 or people who want to work on translation from English to Greek. Hope to see you soon.